Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I'm a contracting and HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, load consultant and have been for many years. I moved to Orange County in 1998 for work and eventually found myself leading a very small project on the upcoming decommission of MCAS, Marine Corps Air Station, El Toro. My job was to basically go into each one of the barracks and outlying buildings that even the Marines hadn't been using for years and tell my boss which ones were worth keeping in the original condition, which turned out to be almost none, for reasons that I will explain. Well, work started in early 2000 on our Site A work area, which was a number of old family-style two-story barracks along the northwest side of the base. For the most part these were uneventful, only running into two occasional wild animal as I checked for buildings with salvageable ducting. The first few weeks of work pass without incident. Close Site A, open Site B. This work area is straight southwest along the northwest perimeter and was comprised of smaller, older one-story barracks and offices. Here's where shit starts to hit the fan. Site B, Isla Sorna on our paperwork because I loved me some dinos, is much smaller than Site A and shouldn't take as many man-hours to go through, so I jump ahead in my assignment and start inspecting the larger buildings on the other side of the base. Well, 2 days into work, I get a call from my boss while I'm out in the field.
The guys say they found something they want you to take a look at, and they're refusing to get back to work until you do.
Fine, I say, and I jump in my truck and take my time meandering across the airfield, enjoying the break from playing phone tag with military personnel all day. When I get there, all 6 of my clean crew guys are standing around outside looking nervous. These are big guys. Most of them are the kind that get paid to go through abandoned homes and tear out their rotten foul guts for remodel or tear down. I know 2 of them personally, and the one that's directly in charge of their group is a close friend of mine. Let's call him Matt. Matt looks considerably less worried than everyone else and walks up to my truck shaking his head. He looks apologetic and says sorry that I have to deal with this before leading me into one of the larger squat brown offices. I'm expecting to see something utterly foul, like a pile of human fecal matter or a large rotting animal corpse, which in hindsight probably wouldn't have really irked those guys in the first place, knowing where they've worked. I was completely unprepared for what I saw. Let's start with the stench, since that's the first thing that I noticed. It was so thick and foul I could almost feel it touching my skin, and it smelled so beyond disgusting that I had to steel myself before taking another step. It was like a couple months of organic decay punctuated by mold, shit, and some bizarre chemical scent that I hadn't noticed in any of the other buildings. Taking that second step took a kind of courage that can only be described as iron stomach. The next thing I noticed were the walls. The tan top layer of paint was peeling away in long strips and clumps, revealing splotchy, dark, wet-looking paint beneath it that was rife with mold. At the time, I was wondering why this building was in such awful shape as compared to the ones directly surrounding it. Matt was looking at me carefully, and only then did I notice that he seemed a little off. Now I've known Matt for years, since long before I moved to Southern California, and I cannot stress enough how stoic and stable this guy is under pressure, but right then his body language said he was on full alert. I'm thoroughly disgusted at this point, and Matt leads me around the bend of the entry hallway, carefully checking around the corner before he turns. His body language is really weirding me out at this point, and I'm starting to get a little on edge myself. As we turn, Matt steps out of the way so I have a clear view of the main room. Most of the furnishings have been pushed to the edges of the room and appended, leaving a clear space in the middle except for one item. Sitting there, dead in the center of the room, is a strange-looking stone pillar with what looks like concave bowl carved into the top. Matt is silent and looking at me with wide eyes as I walk towards it. The floor is tacky, and my footsteps are loud squelches as I take a few steps into the room to get a better look at the pillar thing. As I get closer, the chemical scent in the area gets thicker and almost moist, and I'm regretting leaving my respirator on my passenger seat. I'm close enough now to see the pillar clearly. It's rectangular, about 4 feet high and 1 foot across, and completely smooth like well-poured concrete. The concave spot is about 4 inches deep and darkened like something's been burnt in it. I did not take the time to run my finger through what looked like soot, but the whole ceiling directly above this altar was charred black and sooty. Still trying to rationalize, I look around the room. Matt hasn't moved from his spot in the hallway and still hasn't said more than 4 words since we walked in, again totally atypical of this guy. It's then that I notice the symbols all over the walls and that gross, rotting moldy paint. To this day, the only thing I've seen that looks even remotely like them are some of the rune and sigils threads we frequently see on X. I'm not talking pentagrams or hieroglyphics, but strange designs that are spaced all around the room and sometimes interconnect. I got closer to the nearest one and could see clear evidence of some sort of tool or sharp object having been used to create the marks, and that the others are similarly carved or scratched into the surface, and boy do those marks look fresh. I mean, no mold growing in them, no paint, nothing. At this point, I'm starting to WTF, but am still rationalizing it as a bunch of people just getting together like a cult and being creepy for fun, since people apparently do that. It's right then that Matt and I hear approaching footsteps coming from the entrance hallway. We turn, expecting to see one of the other workers coming in to discuss something, but the footsteps just stop before ever coming around the corner. I've had enough of the stench and strangeness and I'm ready to leave, so I walk towards the exit. So, I'm leaving. Fuck this place. Daylight awaits in a land free of God-hating stench. The second, and I mean the second my foot first touched the ground from my first step toward the exit, the whole building shook. Only for a split second, like when you're standing next to someone at home and they jump, and you feel the ground shake a little. I think to myself, the fuck was that? And hardly have time to finish my thought before the footsteps that we originally heard are now sprinting away from us, back out of the hallway. Matt spins, immediately jumps straight back at me, his face pale and goosebumps all over his arms. I shit you not, I could see how scared he was. He turns and looks at me with a "did you just fucking hear that?" expression. Let's get the fuck out of here, I said, and we quickly make way to the exit. Rounding the corner, we don't see anyone, but the door is now more than halfway closed. I specifically left the door open when I entered because of how absurdly awful the stench was, and now in the sliver of outline, I can see something hanging on the back of the door that I didn't notice on my way in. It's a fresh animal skull, tongue and eyes still in place, but missing almost all of the meat you would normally see. I'm nearly on the verge of soiling myself, and I ask Matt if he or any of the guys had seen this, and he vehemently shakes his head, adamantly stating that it hadn't been there before and that the other guys could back him up on that. There's a large nail going straight through the skull, attaching it to the door and adding to the whole grotesque feel. I knock the door open with my foot and we get the fuck out of there. We get out front and back to the workers, who are all lounging in more or less the same positions we left them in minutes before. I ask them if anyone had entered the building after we did and they look at me like I'm crazy, which I suppose they thought I was for going in there. I ask again thinking that skull had to come from one of the Mexican guys. Carnicerias are about the only place you can find a whole sheep or goat head, which is what I think the skull was, in Southern California, and that thing was fresh. They again look at me like I'm crazy and ask, "What skull?" I'm very thoroughly nopen at this point, and a few of the braver guys venture to the door to have a look. They don't look twice, and their expressions tell me it's still there. They all fervently deny it having been there when they first went in, just like Matt said, and also reconfirm that no one came in after us. So, resolution here. I call my boss and immediately tell him what just happened, and that I fully condone my crew not re-entering the building on grounds of possible health concerns. He goes quiet for a minute, then tells me he's been in touch with someone in charge at the MCAS and will call me back. I never hear back from him on the matter, but the next morning in the office, there's signed demolitions paperwork marking that building and the surrounding ones I'd previously greenlit. The strange part is I'm the person in the company that handles all of the reno paperwork, and the paperwork requires a signature from myself and a witness. I got no explanation, and was told to drop it upon inquiry. Well, that's my story. I know it was long and not that spooky, but it was nice to tell it again. I haven't in years. Matt and I fell out a little after that, and he left his job. He wasn't ever really the same after that. I would love to hear some speculation, and thanks for reading.
This is actually pretty creepy. Since you never directly saw the parts of the building where the footsteps came from, couldn't it be someone was still hiding in there? Attaching the skull to the door and leaving through another exit, window, or just hiding again? Maybe they just wanted to scare you away so they can continue whatever the fuck they were doing there in the first place. Only rational explanation I could think of. There's still the question to why the skull looked like this. I mean, they had to prepare it quite quick as reaction to you guys. Would be great if you could give info concerning this, if it could be possible or if there are reasons that speak against this. Like no other exit, the guys searching the whole building before you got there and so on. I mean, the guys outside had to see if someone would have attached that thing and closes the door, wouldn't they?
You're absolutely right, they should have seen or heard something. Especially with the effort I imagine it would take to nail a skull to a wooden door. I'll try to explain the layout a bit better. All of the windows and most of the doors to the place had been boarded up to keep people out. Of course, over the years things decay and who knows what crazy people are up to. The idea that there was just someone fucking with us is the one thing that keeps me sane about the whole incident. Unfortunately, it was still a very small building, and I'm fairly certain there were no other ways in. Either way, there was definitely only one way into that hallway and to the door. My guys sitting at the entrance, and Matt and I at the other end inside. The building was rectangular, about 120 by 80 or so. The door was in the right-hand side of the long face and once entered, turned left immediately. The hallway had a solid wall on your right as you went in, and I think 2 boarded-up windows on the left. My guys were sitting on the other side of those windows about 25 feet away. The hallway continued about 3/4 the length of the building before taking a sharp right turn onto the main floor. 56 hours in paint, oval as the altar.
This is pretty much the main part that makes it weird for me too. You simply can't easily nail a skull to a door. There's just no way without making some sort of noise except footsteps. But if it wasn't someone, it must be something that is able to interact with matter, since it definitely was there, and I guess it wasn't some kind of replica. The only other thing I could think of is a hidden door, tunnel, but I really can't imagine it was hidden that well. You guys couldn't see it. Especially since the building really is small. Appreciate your paint skills though, good job man. Who knows what kind of shit they tried to summon there. Guess red lighting it was the best idea. Really messed up stuff, even if done by normal people.
Yeah, clearing that building out is what I would have done too. The interesting part for me is that the entire area was demoed also. Things that I had already put in paperwork for, and that would require a huge fiasco of billing and angry contractors to reverse, yet I heard no backlash. The other thing I hoped for was that my crew had somehow missed it on their way in and back hour because of how bizarre the main room was. Not really thinking that one holds much validity though, it was pretty easy to see. That said, I usually just read on this board, saw this thread and had the perfect story so I posted. I'm not too familiar with entities or anything like that, but it's my understanding that if it were simply a manifestation of something, it would need to be very strong to interact with the physical world in such a lasting way.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.